The professionalism, the calmness, the way they went about their business. There's very few fire departments, I think, in the world that could pull off what they did at such a horrible moment with that tragedy. It's just living proof of what they do from day one in the academy, their heritage, their tradition.
Enchanted Sky Media.
From the Enchanted Sky Studios in Prescott, Arizona, this is Code 3, the Firefighters podcast, hosted by award-winning journalist Scott Orr. Code 3 features interviews with leading members of the fire service, discussing firefighting strategies, tactics, and other topics you need to know more about. Now, here's Scott.
That's right, and I will not let Parkinson stop me. Thank you for joining me again here on Code 3. You are listening to the show for and about firefighters. Let's get started. On September 11th, 2001, our world changed. America was just arriving at work for the day when it heard this.
This just in, you are looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center.
Fire Department 408, where's the fire?
Yeah, hi. I'm on the 106th floor of the World Trade Center. We just had an explosion up here.
Okay, 106th floor. What building are you in, sir? 1 or 2?
One World Trade.
All right.
1?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's smoke, and we had about 100 people up here.
All right, we're on the way.
Engine 1 out, World Trade Center, 1060. Send every available ambulance, everything you got to the World Trade Center now.
There's another one. Another plane just hit. Right. Oh my God! Another plane has just hit. It hit another building. Flew right into the middle of it. Explosion.
T3, a major collapse in one of the towers.
Tower, okay.
Tower 2. The South Tower, major collapse.
You can see the firemen assembled here, the police officers, FBI agents, and you can see the two towers. A huge explosion now, raining debris on all of us. We better get out of the way!
That was the day everything we knew was turned upside down. And it was the day that the FDNY suffered 343 line-of-duty deaths in one incident. Many more would take years to lose their battle with cancer caused by working in the rubble. Some are still fighting cancer today, 18 years later. Here to talk about the impact the terror attack on America had on the fire service is Rick Lasky. He's well known around the country for his seminars on pride and ownership. If you've not heard him speak live, you've missed an amazing presentation. You really should book him to speak at your next major event. I've heard him and I recommend him highly. Rick retired after being chief of several departments, including Louisville, Texas. He started his career 40 years earlier in Chicago, which is where I hail from myself. And Rick Lasky joins me now. Welcome back to Code 3.
Hey, it's great to be here, Scott. Thanks for having me on again. It's an honor.
Well, it's always good to talk with you. Today, of course, we want to talk about the events of September 11, 2001. I want to start with where you were when you heard about it.
Well, I was fire chief in Louisville, Texas, which is about 10 minutes north of Dallas there. I ran out to meet someone and was on my way back. I ran through one of these little coffee huts for a cup of coffee, and my next telephone started beeping off my belt, if you will. Got back to quarters and went into the day room. The guys had the television on. They were watching it. And as we've all seen over and over again, a few minutes later, we saw the second plane hit. And Scott, while I'm sitting there, the first thing I'm thinking of is, all my friends, who's on duty, who's not on duty. And then when that second plane hit was it was just like everybody else. It was just absolute shock on such a horrible, horrible day.
You, like everyone else, may have assumed that the first one was some kind of horrific accident, but the second one was obviously intentional.
Well, yeah, the initial reports, about it being a sightseeing plane, media thing, whatever. When they showed the hole in the side of the building, I'm a little bit more suspicious of most people, but I'm sitting there going, it's way too big for them to, be talking about a smaller plane. Secondly, those buildings are big, 110 stories an acre in size, but boy, oh boy, it's hard to imagine it being an accident. And about that time, like you said, Scott, the second one hit, and we all knew at that point that it wasn't an accident.
Now, you mentioned the fact that you do have a lot of friends in the FDNY. How long after it happened did you start to hear from them as to whether they were involved in what they knew about what was going on?
Well, throughout the day, everybody was checking with everybody. The circle of friends I run with through Fire Engineering Magazine and just in my teaching, rounds over the years, my best friend, the best friend I ever had in my life is John Salka, and he was battalion chief in the 18th Battalion in New York City. I started thinking of John. I talked to Andy Fredericks. A lot of people know firefighter now, Lieutenant Andy Fredericks. I talked to him the day before. Andy actually went back a day early. He had been off with a knee injury, and he was coming down to Louisville to teach for our guys. And we were setting that up. We were talking on the phone, and he said, I hated being away from the firehouse for all these months, being hurt. He goes, I can't wait to get back, but the best thing about it is I got to go to Haley's first day of kindergarten, his daughter. We both have daddy's girls, and as we all know, Andy was taken from us on that day. But just so many great people, the talent. I know we only have so much time, but when you think about all the people that we lost, just on the fire service side, on the EMS side, on law enforcement, then what happened in Shanksville, with the plane that went down there, and at the Pentagon. Coincidentally, my good friend, Colonel Brian Birdwell, now Senator Birdwell from Granbury, Texas, the nose of that plane was a direct hit on his office, killed all his staff. They were in their meeting room, their conference room, watching everything unfold in New York City. He went up to go to the men's room on his way back. It hit, the fireball burned him really bad, killed all his staff. Colonel Birdwell, Senator Birdwell now, after that created Face the Fire Ministries out near Granbury, Texas, where servicemen and women who are burned, injured bad, can go and hunt and fish and horseback ride without people pointing fingers and looking at him. He's a great man, and I love him dearly. But watching everything unfold in New York City, I'll be honest, I didn't know my best buddy. I heard he was okay, and that was through people talking, I think I saw him, all this, till I heard some of the radio transmissions on the news at about 9:15 at night. And I'll be honest with you, I'm a man's man, but I broke down and cried. I remember sitting with my wife at having a late dinner and just taking everything in. Throughout the day, we kept hearing who was on duty, who wasn't on duty. And as you know, Scott, it was so hard because, at shift change, so many people who were supposed to be off duty jumped on their rigs and went down there as well. Guys who were off duty went down there as well. So it was just hard keeping track of everybody and where they were. I
know exactly what you're talking about. And in the intro to this interview, of course, we played that montage of all the radio traffic. And when I was putting that together, it gave me chills even 18 years later.
Well, I ended up down there a few days later. I went back and forth. I went from being just devastated and sad to becoming angry, back to being sad. I've always said I can't imagine. I always tell my best buddy John Salka, I said that was your family. You're an FDNY battalion chief. All those years on the job there, busiest companies. His very good friend, one of his best friends, Jay Jonas, now deputy chief. I think he's a borough commander or acting borough commander in the 7th Division in the Bronx. Jay was the captain on Ladder 6 that everybody's heard about over the years. I think the one special is called in the History Channel, The Miracle of Stairwell B. They were bringing Josephine down. Jay and John went to the academy, the Proby school together. They carpooled. Jay is godfather for one of John's sons, James, who's currently a captain in the Marines. just talking with some of my friends, not knowing, assuming and thinking, well, they got to be gone after so long. It's just, you kind of lose some hope. You're just hoping that they bring your friends home so their family can have closure. But the emotion, like I said, I can't even imagine. My heart was broken. I won't say my spirit. I will say this: if you're a firefighter, I've said this forever. If you're a firefighter and you listen to those audio tapes then and you listen to them today, if you don't feel proud in any way as to what you do after listening to our brothers in New York City, the calmness. I mean, after the collapse, there was a little bit of higher pitched radio traffic, but the professionalism, the calmness, the way they went about their business. There's very few fire departments, I think, in the world that could pull off what they did at such a horrible moment with that tragedy. It's just living proof of what they do from day one in the academy, their heritage, their tradition, what they produce. But the talent, all those folks taken from their families. It's been a while, but it seems like yesterday, unfortunately. And Scott, it's on my challenge coins. One of the sayings I kind of came up with after that, because everybody did the whole never forget thing right away. Never forget, never forget. And, I've said for years, I've written about it and I've talked about it. Never forgetting means never forgetting. And, for the longest time, Scott, you could go to FDIC in Indianapolis, any show where there's exhibits, and pretty much every piece of fire apparatus had a memorial decal on it, something remembering those that were lost. And now you'd be hard pressed. I know in Louisville they do it. I know in the Colony, Texas, they do it. There's still some holdouts that are with good bosses that are doing great things. But so many people just kind of, it was popular to put a sticker on my side of my rig back then and on my helmet. And, it's been a while now. And that's probably the most frustrating thing. It's not about wanting people to remain angry and upset. It's about never forgetting the talent that was stolen from us that day, because I still believe they continue to teach. They continue. Andy Fredericks is still teaching to us today, and so many other people from there are, Scott. So I think I wish more people would zoom in on the never forgetting means never forgetting. I'm glad they do the stair climbs. I think some of those have turned into more of a spectator sport, kind of like people that were getting pieces of steel from the World Trade Center, holding parades and barbecues and celebrations. And I'm glad we have a piece of it, an artifact on display in Louisville. But there were some departments that did the right thing, Scott, and they did it very honorable. And some had turned it into I'll just say it was kind of like a 3-ring circus, and that was sad to see. But I will say this: the majority of departments did what was right, did the right thing, and have a very nice memorial that will be there forever to remember those we lost. So, long story short, never forgetting means never forgetting, right?
And I think that's important. I saw a meme on Facebook the other day for the first time that said, "You said you'd never forget. Have you?" Yeah, I've seen that several times now. And it's a couple of years ago, I was doing a talk, and I think I was interim chief in Trophy Club at the time in Texas, helping them get a new chief. And one of the things, I did a talk at the high school, and I realized that was the first year we had freshmen in high school that weren't alive for September 11, 2001. So it is moving out there in years, but at the same time, it hasn't been that long. And, I think the day we forget, the day we do an injustice to the sacrifices made by everybody. And I'm talking citizens. There were a lot of hero citizens that day, Scott. The police officers, law enforcement, EMS, so many people. We forget about the fire patrolman, that was taken from us that day at the World Trade Center, the dispatcher from Jersey City that responded over mutual aid, one of their chiefs. And there's so many stories of acts of bravery by people that weren't wearing a badge or wearing a helmet. So many great people taken from us. So it's more than just that whole never forget. It really means not forgetting. True, but I do recall that series on TV a few years back called Rescue Me with Dennis Leary. Part of the backstory of that series was that they were a little frustrated that people, even in New York City, they felt starting to forget about what had happened. And at one point, a character even said, well, it's been 3 years. You can't expect people to remember forever.
Well, that's sad in itself, and I agree with you, buddy. I will say this for those that watch the series Chicago Fire, our good friend Chief Steve Chikarotis, now retired chief from Chicago, the technical advisor for that show, many other shows, movies. Steve is a true brother. He is a great man, a great leader, a friend to so many people, a mentor. When they wrote the show for Chicago Fire a couple years ago and had my friend John Salka come on and play himself about the battalion chief from Chicago going back to New York City, I will say this. You need to watch that to your listeners. You need to watch that episode. Listen to what that chief says the moment he starts describing what happened. He takes you from the Chicago firehouse to them getting out of the cab in front of 10 and 10's house in New York and at the base of the Freedom Tower at the World Trade Center site. And then you see our friend John Salka come out and greet him. When you hear him explain about how how you're supposed to feel when he sees the little kids running around by the fountains, by the memorial fountains, I'll tell you, Steve Chikarotis and their writers did an incredible job, Scott, really explaining for how you should feel. A lot of people were frustrated. A lot of people, especially firefighters, we're used to saving people or doing everything we can. And when you get there and after a while, there's nothing you could do. You feel almost like you failed them. And that's what he had to overcome. It's just an incredible, I know it's a TV show, but what an incredible way to explain how you should feel. And I think a lot of people, Scott, have struggled with, okay, should I be angry? Should I be sad? Should I just, once in a while, I think you need to take time to celebrate the lives of those who were lost. We did a show on fire engineering, and we had Chief Jay Jonas, I mentioned Jay, come on the show, and Captain Mike Dugan, another great guy. And we talked about those we lost. We didn't go back to that day per se and talk about Mike working, Mike's the one that hung the flag up over on the light stand that you saw in Reader's Digest. Jay obviously being rescued after the collapse, the Miracle Stairwell B. Scott, we were able to sit down and talk about those we lost and celebrate their lives and shared some stories about Andy, Billy McGinn. Lieutenant Billy McGinn was lieutenant of Squad 18, who was the one on the radio that said that, not exactly word for word, but some lines, that plane was flown deliberately into that building. We need to be thinking terrorism. Billy was one of our instructors at FDIC, good friend of John Salka's again. I told a little story about him it's a funny story. So we shared some stories about the incredible people that were taken from us that day, and some teaching moments, some funny moments about them. And it's easy to get sad on September 11th, the days leading up to and after, but once in a while I think we need to spend time talking about those people and just how great they were and what they meant to us.
What do you think of the tourists who go out there and shoot smiling selfies and with the memorial in the background?
I struggle with that, like a lot of people. I've been a big fan of on the fire scene when your guys and gals make a good stop, make a grab, make a rescue. When nobody's around, you kind of get them together, you take a picture of the moment, celebrating, their victory at that fire scene. I take issue with some of the people. I think some of it is an accident. I think some people want to record the moment. They're standing in front of the memorial, or they're standing somewhere there, and they smile because most people do that. Most people smile when you take pictures of them. So I think some of it's by accident. I think some of them that are taken, I think these are probably the few, don't exercise that good judgment. And those are the people I really wish wouldn't do it. But I think a lot of it, Scott, a lot of the selfies are people recording the moment. Here I am at the World Trade Center, at the memorial, at the fountains, getting ready to go into the memorial, the museum. And I think it's just a natural. It's you know what I'm saying, Scott. Sometimes it's just people are so. Very few people take a picture of them, of themselves or with people where they don't smile.
It's just sort of a reflex.
Yeah, but you're right on some. I guess some of them are totally uncalled for and they're in very poor taste. But I think the majority of them are people trying to record the moment. And it's like people that go out to Pearl Harbor and stand on top of the Arizona, go to, Normandy Beach or whatever, they record the moment. I think most of the people that go there with a full heart and don't mean to be disrespectful. It's the ones, and the other ones, Scott, they do that stuff everywhere. They're the ones that'll pull up at an accident scene and make jokes about the people that are hurt or the cars, or you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I really think those are the few. I think most of people, like you said, it's a reflex thing. They take a smile and it's like, well, too late, I already smiled. I'm mixed on it, but I think most of people really don't mean it on purpose, to be disrespectful.
Now, have you been out to the memorial since it became an official memorial?
Yes. I took my wife and my daughter, and my son was actually in the service in Afghanistan at the time. He was an FMF corpsman, a Fleet Marine Force corpsman with the Navy attached to the Marines, and he couldn't go with us. But we went. My buddy John Sulka went with us, and I'll say this: I went. I don't know if I'll go back, only because it made me very, very sad. But it was done very tastefully. I think if you're going to New York City, you need to visit the site. You need to visit the fountains. You need to visit the museum, if you will, and pay your respects. Very, very professionally, very, very tastefully, respectfully, very honorable what they did and how they did it.
I will admit I've not been there yet. However, I imagine it's similar to something I experienced when, I used to do TV news. I went to the Oklahoma City site when they still had the fence up with T-shirts on it. Happened to run into 3-4, I guess it was, Secret Service agents who were all there for an event, and they went over to see the fence and look at the shirts. All four of them looked at the bombing site. Then they all turned away from each other, and I wondered what that was, and I realized they were all tearing up and didn't want each other to see it. Is that the kind of reaction you had?
Yeah, yes. I'm a time bomb of tears when it comes to some things, as it is. But I had been down there pretty quick, and my good friend Don Haid just retired from the rescue battalion chief. I think at the time he retired, he was the most tenured FDNY firefighter. A Marine, a great guy. We taught together for years, for decades. He, John Norman from New York City, who took the reins for Chief Ray Downey, another one of my mentors that was taken from us that day. Sal Marchese from New York. He was at the time assigned a 142 truck in Queens. I met Donnie, and he was in the rescue battalion, and we went down there, and I remember standing with him and looking, and I just stood there, with tears in my eyes, but I stood there, I couldn't put it together. And I had been down there, I can't tell you how many times. I can't tell how many times I've spent riding out in New York City with my friends with the fire department. I couldn't put it together. And he asked me, he goes, have you put it together yet? And I said, no. And then he started pointing out landmarks, and I was able to start to put things together. But it was incredible to see that. Not too long after that, we were down there. My wife, my daughter, and John Salka took us to the top of 10 and 10's house when they would allow you up there. Right after that, they had a piece of the Deutsche building next door fall off and actually fall through the stairwell. So they said no longer people up on the roof. But we went up there. We were able to look at the site. My wife's a minister's daughter, so obviously with some prayers, and then see them as they started to finish things off down. Looking down in there. Again, it's a very emotional place. Again, loss of words sometimes when it comes to describing the feelings, but so many great people taken from us that day.
Yeah, there were, and I think as much as we're sad that they're gone, we're proud of what they tried to accomplish, and in a lot of cases, what they did accomplish. These are the people that the media likes to say run toward disasters when everyone else is running away, and we can be proud of the brothers who did that.
Absolutely. That Jay Jonas did a newsletter on Captain Patty Brown. I will say it, he would never consider himself a legend. He's a modest person, but what a great man that was taken from us that day. Patty Brown, if you listen to radio traffic, I don't think you heard it before, and you'll never hear it again. Being ordered out of building, I think by Chief Hayden, who had taken over command, Pete Hayden. he's calling on the radio, ladder 3, evacuate the building, trying to get him on the radio. And I think he finally said, command post to ladder 3 Captain Patty Brown, evacuate the building immediately. And Patty Brown came back on the radio and said, ladder 3 to command post, I am respectfully refusing that order. I have too many injured civilians. This is a Vietnam vet. This is a unbelievably decorated Vietnam vet and FDNY firefighter. And like you said, they went in. I don't think a lot of people knew. A lot of people like to say they did now. I don't think a lot of people knew those buildings were going to come down like they did. But, no hesitation, whether you're waiting for orders or you went up with other crews. You had a lot of things going on. Just the site is a 16-acre site, forgetting all the buildings around it that were damaged, before the collapse and after the collapse, and then the building, the 40-story that collapsed later on. You're right. To see them going in, that goes back, Scott, to what I said. Listen to the radio traffic. Some places they scream over a dumpster fire, a trash can fire, whatever.
Yeah, but these guys are seasoned. I mean, to them, it was going to work and doing the job. It wasn't time to panic.
Exactly. It was time to go to work. And that's why there was no hesitation. There was no, well, what do you think? We talk about, firefighters being aggressive. I think we're blessed if firefighters are aggressive. Talk for another day. It's an article I did, are we too aggressive or just using the wrong word? We get ourselves hurt when we become reckless, but I thank God every day firefighters are aggressive enough to go in after that kid, go after that grandma, go in after another firefighter, run into those 2 towers like they did on that day. That just, I think it defines what the fire service represents. So I said, if you're not proud of those people, proud of that moment, of the sacrifices, as horrible as that is, and I know that sounds goofy, to know what they represented for all of us as firefighters, what we stand for, absolutely incredible what they demonstrated that day. And I don't even think you can say acts of bravery is even appropriate. That goes well beyond that.
That's true, and we'll leave it there. Some great memories of what you saw and what you experienced, Chief. Thanks for being with me today on Code 3.
Scott, thank you. Like I said, it's always an honor, buddy, when you invite. I'll do it anytime. You're a great guy. You're making a huge difference in the fire service, and I can't thank you enough for that, buddy. Thanks for what you do.
And we put more information about the September 11th attacks on our website at code3podcast.com/terrorism. Check it out. All right, that's it. That's all for this edition of Code 3. Thank you for listening. I'll be back next time with more, and I hope you'll join me then. I'm Scott Orr, and until then, stay safe.
Code 3 is a production of Enchanted Sky Media. To contact us, get more information on today's topic, or to subscribe to the podcast, go to code3podcast.com.